Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Shake Sales. I'm your host, Sujan Patel. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mailshake. Today I've got Carole Mahoney. We're going to talk about asking the right questions, changing questions, and really digging into actually how to conduct. What would you say? It's like the demo or the conversation you have with that prospect, right?
Yeah, whether it's your first discovery conversation, getting consensus or qualifying or demo or a proposal meeting, there's some major and basic steps that we should all be taking as individual salespeople to make those as effective and as valuable for our buyers as possible. So I'm excited to share a few tips there.
Well, then, for those of you that don't know Carole, she's the author of Buyer First and the founder of Unbound Growth. So, you've been in the sales space and growth space for a long time, and I'd love to kind of dig in. So, this is an interesting topic. I mean, like, I feel like not enough has changed in the understanding the buyer, right? So what do you mean by like changing the question or asking the right question?
So a lot of times when I'm working with individual contributors, I ask them, so what are the types of questions that you're asking on your sales call? Or what are your top 5 questions? And they'll rattle off things like, what are the issues that you're having today? And how much budget do you have to solve for this? Who's the ultimate decision maker here? And the majority of the time, the questions that salespeople are asking are the questions they care about. These are the questions that I need in order to qualify you, in order to move you to the next stage on my pipeline, in order for me to know that I'm moving forward towards the close. And we somehow forget that what it's like to be in the buyer's shoes when we slip on our seller's hats. And that a lot of times, actually, no, not a lot of times, every time that a buyer or anyone encounters an issue or a problem, there's a series of questions that we ask ourselves. And if we're not getting answers to our questions in the conversations that we're having with salespeople, not only do they not have value for us, but it contributes to the 40 to 60% of deals out there that end in no decision because we haven't answered our buyers' questions of why do I need to make a change? Why do I need to make a change now? Why should I make this particular change? And why you? There's a whole bunch of whys that we're asking that we're not getting answers to because salespeople are so focused on asking the questions that they care about and not the ones their buyers care about.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? And hence you wrote a book on this, buyer first, right? Yeah. And I feel like, as a buyer of software, I mean, I'm also a seller, but I feel like folks come in when I get presented a demo, I'm like, I've already done my research. I kind of know I have like 3 questions. I'm like, 20 minutes of the call, I was like this canned thing that I already know. And I'm like, wait, can I ask a question? They're like, not yet. And I'm like, so, I mean, it's not always like this, not yet, but I'm like, I don't just something like, oh yeah. I mean, they always drive me back to their script type of thing. So I guess question on your script or process and whatnot. So with this approach, are you suggesting kind of like breaking the mold of having that script, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I am not a believer of scripts because what happens is it creates this myopia in the salesperson that they can't go outside of the lines. They can't deviate from their script. And what happens is that we're now trying to force our buyers to work within our script and our sales process, which isn't always in alignment with theirs. And so as individual salespeople, we need to be able to be in the moment and flexible enough and know our process well enough and our positioning statement well enough that we don't need to follow an exact script, but that we can move and flow within a natural conversation with someone to develop a curiosity to understand them, but then also to ask them the provocative types of questions that are going to get them to share what they think. And what also happens is get them to start changing how they view things. Because what happens according to psychology and neuroscience is that when we start asking people more open-ended questions that cause them to share what they think and elaborate on their situation, not only do we understand them better, but according to a study from Stanford, it also causes people to change the way that they think about things. Like, think about it. Have you ever had a conversation with someone like, I come home and my husband sits down after work and he asks me about my day and I start telling him about an issue and he'll ask me 1 or 2 questions and I start going off on a rant. And by the end of my rant, I've taken a different perspective or changed my mind. He's like, do I even need to be involved in this conversation? we need to add an element of that into our sales conversations with buyers, because the other thing that's happening is that when we're asking open-ended questions and we're sharing what we think, it's lighting up the areas of our brain where dopamine gets released. And dopamine is that feel-good chemical, which is why all of us love talking about what we think. But it also comes from the part of our brain where we form relationships and bonds of trust with people. We tend to trust the people who care about what we think enough to ask. Is as simple as it is. And so in our sales conversations, yes, we need to have a plan of what are the questions that we're going to ask based on our research, because our buyers, like you said, are doing their research. We need to be doing ours. And then asking those targeted questions that help them to understand or take a different stance or view on something as they're sharing it with you. And then using the answers that you get from those questions to be able to collaborate with your buyers to come up with how this solution is going to uniquely solve their problem in a quantifiable way. But we don't do that. Instead, we ask the questions that are in our script. We get the stock basic answers. We typically aren't getting to decision makers because we're not adding value in the conversation. And then our deals are stalling. They're not going anywhere, no matter how many discounts we offer. We don't understand what it is that we're doing wrong. And the thing that we're doing wrong is we've made it all about ourselves. So there's some questions that I coach on people to ask. And it starts with, so why are we talking today? What have you already tried to solve this? What worked? What didn't work? Who else gets impacted by this? And how long has this been going on for? And when does this become too big of a problem that's easy for you to solve? And these are questions that are very basic types of questions, but that you can target and make even more specific to your buyers based on your research. And while those are good starting points, and Gong data suggests, I think, that somewhere between 9 and 14 questions, depending on who you're talking to, is a good number of questions to have in a conversation, which are plenty of questions for you to be able to get information from. But what I often find is that even if they know the questions that they should ask that are buyer focused, that get them talking, most of the time what salespeople do is they start word vomiting as soon as they get on the conversation, because they get nervous or they get excited or they get lost and didn't understand what the person was saying. And so then they revert back to what they know, which is their script. So how do we change this behavior, this default? And that's where we need to practice more. Like everyone who is in sales, you are a performer. And as a performer, like most people who are good performers, they don't just get up there and wing it. I'm just going to put this out there. Did anybody watch the roast of Tom Brady on Netflix? A couple of people did. You're smiling, so maybe you did.
Yeah.
If you do, and you go back and you look at it, you'll see that there's a marked difference between certain performances there. I'm just going to say that, when Ben Affleck got up there, you could tell that he wasn't prepared. He hadn't practiced anything, and he was just kind of winging it because he didn't think it was that big of a deal. Compare that to the performance of some of the other people that were there, and they did an excellent job because they had practiced, because they had prepared. And we need to do the same thing as salespeople. We can't pull the Ben Affleck and just dial it in. We need to actually be practiced in our conversations. And the only way that we're going to do that is through role play, whether that's with our managers, whether that's with each other as salespeople. The more you can practice these questions in a role play conversation, the more repetitions that you can get in, the smoother and easier it's going to be for you later on. And here's the thing. You can practice on anybody around you. Like I practice on people all the time, whether I'm at the grocery store or the Uber driver or the waiter or waitress at a restaurant. You can practice asking open-ended questions of anyone around you just to build the muscle.
I love it. Yeah. I think one of the things, so first of all, if you're listening or watching, you got to go buy our book. Like this will probably walk you through like, I'm thinking like, how the heck do I change this, that, the other? Like, just stop. Just go buy the book, read it, and then you could probably ask or follow you and ask questions or whatnot. But
yeah,
I think the big thing is like, as you're talking, I'm like, actually, what you're really doing in this by asking these questions and really making it about the buyer is helping them sell themselves, right? Like, how many people does it affect? Oh crap. Well, this affects everyone at my company. I probably should do something about this. Or maybe, I think this is also helps people create an accurate forecast. Like you ask certain questions. I know the objective is to make it about the buyer, but let's be realistic. People are pretty selfish, right? Okay. What's in it for you? A better forecast or better understanding how likely this deal is going to close. Like, how big is the problem? Oh, I'm just exploring. I'm not ready to buy yet. Like, you're going to get some of these answers that are going to help you better qualify, disqualify this deal or whatever. And effectively, you know, for what's in it for me is I hit my numbers or beat my numbers and I really go ham on the deals that are very likely to close or it's the biggest problem for a
Yeah.
customer.
I think we have this misconception in sales that we're responsible for creating urgency in our buyers. It's almost like you can force them to feel something that they don't actually feel, which is impossible. And so I think if we can focus on not creating urgency in our buyers, but asking the questions to uncover whether or not there is a sense of urgency right now, if this does have a big impact on multiple people. And it's not enough for people to feel the pain of something. We have to make it abundantly clear how our solution solves the problem in a quantifiable way. Because where I see a lot of the gap happening is we ask the questions that we care about, and then we struggle to figure out, how do I tie my features and benefits to the things that they shared in the conversation? And because we're not able to do that, buyers don't feel confident that any decision they make is going to make a difference. So they make no decision. So until we make sure that we're answering their questions in their buying process, uncovering whether there's a sense of urgency, not only, to your point, are we going to get more predictable rates, but when you collaborate with buyers, you're also going to see a higher average value of those orders because we place more value on things that we've had a say in creating versus things that have been created for us by an expert. We're not as invested in that. So not only will you sell more now, have more predictable pipelines later, but research also shows that you're more likely to have evangelistic customers later who are going to say wonderful things about you, which is how you scale.